Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Josiah Thibodeau, and today we're going to be talking about the idea of centering yourself when you feel like you're spinning out of control. Now, this is going to be going into how to regain control over your emotions when you feel overwhelmed, or maybe you're reacting as opposed to responding to a situation, exploring, the different emotional cycles or stress responses that we might have, and then some different practical strategies that you can use to begin to maybe break free from some of these habitual emotional patterns that you might find yourself continually cycling through as you go through life. So it's understanding the emotions and the habitual responses that we have, that they're not fixed realities, that there's something that generally we've developed over time based off of the different experiences that we've had in life, the different situations we might have been involved with. There's a lot of different ways that we can get to the emotional life that we live on a regular basis. So it's going in, though, and understanding, hey, I don't have to stay this way. Just because this is how my emotional life is right now, or my thought life is right now, it doesn't mean that I have to stay here. I'm not stuck here. So it's, how do we understand, okay, this is where I am, this is where I want to be. How do I get to this place where I want to be? And when you begin to realize this, you start to understand that, hey, I do have the power to change. A lot of times we feel like we don't have the power to change because we've lived with these emotions for so long, we start to think that this is normal. This is normal life, and everybody feels like this. Even when we see things contrary to what we know as our normal, we can still kind of have that tendency that everybody is just going along through the same, slog that I am, and this is just how life is. We're all pretending. Why are we here? There's a lot of different thoughts that you can have based on the emotional turmoil that you might be going through. So understanding that these emotional feelings can sometimes lead you down a downward spiral, and because of that, we end up continually struggling with the same emotions over and over and over again, whether we want to or not. If you're dealing with anger, depression, anxiety, resentment, bitterness, jealousy, there's so many different emotions that we might have attached to because this is what allowed me to get through a particular experience in life. But because that experience was so strong, whenever this similar situation, or even situations that aren't similar but maybe have just a tinge of that same experience, now I'm going to respond the way that I did during that intense experience, because that's how I've informed myself, hey, this is how I need to live in the world to protect myself, for survival, to make sure that I'm okay, to make sure my family's okay, my kids are okay, my friends, whoever it is. It's kind of that fight or flight response that's kicking in. Now, the goal of this really is to begin to understand what's going on so that we can regain control over those emotions and not have to live in that place. Because we don't want to be living in a state of anger all the time. We don't want to be living in a state of jealousy all the time. It's not healthy for us. We want to be in the states of love and joy and peace. We want to be in the states of gratitude and generosity and happiness. But there's a lot of times where we get sidetracked because of the emotions that we've generated for ourselves or built up over time, or taught ourselves how to live from, that it seems like, oh, happiness is for other people. Like, I don't think I'll ever be able to be happy in my life because of whatever the excuse is. We make excuses all the time for why we can't be or do certain things, when in reality, we all have the same biochemistry. We all should be able to move forward in a way where we can get to that place where we are living a healthy, happy life. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody's exactly the same mentally, physically, spiritually, all across the spectrums, but we should all have the capability of being able to change and maybe move into a state where it's not as negative as it might be right now. We have to understand that a lot of times these emotional reactions are built over time. It can come from, different forms of stress, conflict, frustration, competition with other people. It could come from your parents. It could come from your friends. It could come from a poor experience during high school or middle school or preschool. There's so many different situations that can happen within a person's life that will inform them that, hey, the world isn't the way that I thought it was. And because it isn't the way that I think it is, and this is what happened, then I need to make sure that I am operating from this frame of mind or frame of reference so that I can continue to keep myself safe within the world. And because of that, I'm going to keep believing that the emotional response that I have is okay. But we have to get to the point where we understand that a lot of times those emotions are just subconscious programming that we have developed over time. And again, as I've said, in the past couple of episodes, this quote from Carl Jung, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. A lot of times what we do is we have this strong emotional feeling and then we play it out. Another time it rises up, we play it out. Another time it happens, we play it out. Or, we go through this intense experience and we can't let it go. We can't get it out of our minds. We can't get it out of our hearts, out of our bodies. And so we're reliving this moment over and over and over again, and we're practicing this emotion. So it's either we're going through the same experience over and over again, or we're reliving it in our minds over and over again. And as we do that, we're producing certain chemicals that cause feelings in our bodies. We're remembering the situation. There's so many different aspects that can go into why you would continue to feel a certain way. But it's getting to the point that we understand, I'm living this way and acting this way because I generated a certain amount of emotion or type of emotion within me that I then practiced over time, and then it just became normal. I created a habit for that emotion. And so how do we get out of that? For me, my issue was really depression and anxiety and struggling through just the longest, most terrible road. I mean, I really would not wish this on anybody, but there are millions, potentially billions of people who do struggle with it. And it's miserable. It's just a miserable experience. But when I look back on my life, I wasn't always depressed. I wasn't always anxious. Sure, you might have moments where you feel depressed or anxious, and maybe some people tend to lean that way a little more than others, just depending on your personality, which is okay. But when I look back on my life, there wasn't a lot of information there where I could go back and be like, well, yeah, I've always been that way. No, I wasn't. I was a pretty carefree child growing up. Over time, certain things happened that I would maybe latch onto that was a more negative experience that caused me to feel like, well, I'm not safe in this particular moment. So I need to, I'm going inward and it doesn't feel good, or I feel scared, or I feel angry, or whatever that situation was. And then the next time a similar situation like that happened, it's like I started to recall some of those past feelings and live that out or play that out again. I haven't necessarily had one just super traumatic experience that just caused, locked me into a particular feeling. Mine was more of having these different moments across time that I then associated these particular feelings with. And then once I got to, mid-late teens, I really started to kind of sink into depression and anxiety because I didn't like, certain family dynamics or social dynamics, or, the way that I perceived the world should be versus the way that it actually was. And I allowed myself to get caught up in these feelings of depression and anxiety, where I very could have easily chosen a different route. Had maybe somebody been there to show me, hey, dude, you're doing this thing. You don't need to do that. You can move beyond this. You don't have to live in that place. You don't have to live that way. But there wasn't anybody there at that time for me, so I didn't even know what was going on. So for you, you might have something similar. Everybody deals with something. It's not that we're all free and clear of this. Every single person deals with some sort of emotional turmoil, and it's how do you get to the point where you can either lessen it or break free from it so that you don't have to live with that any longer. You can kind of transition from the emotional turmoil that you're living in into a place where you do want to be. That whole peace, joy, love, gratitude, happiness kind of idea. So it's how do we get there, really? And some of it's just understanding a little bit more about what's happening in your brain, what's happening in your body. Like your body's releasing certain chemicals that cause you to feel a certain way. It's a whole fight or flight response. Pumping adrenaline or dopamine or whatever it is that's causing you to have that sensation or experience during the particular event. that's either making you afraid, making you angry, making you depressed or anxious. There's so many different feelings that we might have depending on what we're going through, but it's starting to understand, okay, I'm going through this experience. My body's producing these chemicals, which are, driving the emotion or the feeling. And now what I'm doing when I go back is I'm practicing that whole kind of situation all over again. And so in a sense, I'm releasing some of these same chemicals. I'm reliving that experience in real time, even though it's not happening now. But this is where the emotional patterns start to become habitual. We practice it for so long, it just becomes second nature. We don't even think about it anymore. I didn't think about being depressed. I didn't have to spend time going, okay, I need to feel depressed right now. All right, let's get into that. Let's get into the vibe of depression so that we can feel depressed about what's going on in our life. I didn't have to do that. I'd practiced it so much, it was subconscious. It was that whole Carl Jung quote, the unconscious becoming conscious. I wasn't becoming conscious of it. Everything was just unconscious, and my life was being directed, and I called it fate. I didn't use those words, but that's essentially how I lived my life for a long, long time, because it was just normal. I just thought, this is normal. This is what normal life is like. This is what most people are dealing with. Most people feel the way that I do. We're all just trying to figure it out and suffer through it until we can get to the point where we get to die. That was kind of my mentality, is I can't wait till we get to the moment where we all get to die and we don't have to deal with this anymore. Isn't that crazy? We can get to that state. And some of you know what I'm talking about. Maybe others of you don't know. And that's okay. But it's these patterns or these habits that we create through our emotions. And then, it's just staying stuck there because of whatever situations are going on. It's almost, when I was dealing with it, it was almost like I would make up scenarios to allow myself to feel that way again. Now, there might be some truth to the scenario about why I should feel that way, but overall, when I look back at a lot of the different situations that I was in, a lot of the different scenarios that I ran into or was up against, when I look at that, most of the time I'm just like, the feelings that you had weren't really warranted for that particular situation or circumstance that you were involved in. Like, you brought your baggage to that situation because you didn't know how to handle the situation any other way. You didn't know how to handle it calmly or peacefully. You knew how to handle it with depression or anger or resentment or bitterness. So you brought that in. So you'd get angry at somebody because they said something to you that you didn't like, or they didn't do something that you should have thought they should have done. And so you become angry about it because you don't know how to, go into that with a peaceful kind of attitude instead. I didn't know that. I was just dragging all my baggage in with me into whatever situation I was going into and then living life from that place, whether people wanted, to be a part of that or not. And I look back on some of these relationships that I've had with people, whether work or friendships or whatever, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, dude, you were the cause of so much like strife and contention just because you didn't know how to handle yourself. And so I think it's coming to that understanding of what's actually going on and realizing that, okay, like I'm having these emotions. It's not necessarily these people out here, right? It's not necessarily your adversaries, these people that are holding you back, or these circumstances that are happening around you that are causing you to feel this way. A lot of times it's just how you perceive the world. It's how you feel about what's going on. And so because you feel a specific way about that, you turn that into, well, it's them, whatever them is. It could be the situation, it could be the people, it could be the government, it could be the world, it could be any of those things. Them, that, out there. It's that thing out there that's causing the issue and strife in my life. When the reality is, a lot of it's just the internal issues that you're not dealing with, the internal turmoil that you're not dealing with. And we don't deal with that because it's hard. It can be very difficult. It means we have to take responsibility. And that's one of the hard things that I had to go through to get over the depression and anxiety, was starting to reconcile the fact that pretty much most of the negative things that were happening in my life were because of me, not because of other people. Not because of the circumstances I was in. It was because of me. Because I didn't know how to regulate myself and entertain the idea that, well, maybe these people aren't wrong and maybe I need to change the way that I'm looking at this whole situation. Maybe I need to change the way that I'm viewing this individual. I think they're, whatever person. Stupid, mean, arrogant, whatever. I think they're this, but maybe they're not that. And I'm just putting this label on them because of the emotions that I'm used to feeling all the time. And so it's become this thing of, well, you're the problem because I feel this way. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. One of the things that really helped me with this was Dr. Joe Dispenza's thinking and feeling loop, the way that he would describe, the way that you think about something eventually transcends into the body and you start to feel that way. And the more that you feel that way, the more that you think that way. The more you think that way, the more that you feel that way. And I look back on my life and I was like, yeah, I've done that the majority of my life. I mean, we all do. You have a specific way that you think and feel, and you just kind of go on that track because your brain is comfortable with thinking and feeling that way. It becomes used to thinking and feeling in certain ways because it's easy to do that. We're trying to create the path of least resistance, and our brain doesn't want to expend the energy necessary to think a different, contrary way to what we're used to thinking. So it's just like, hey, remember that time when this happened? And remember how easy it is to just act out the way that you normally act out? Let's just do that again here because it's going to be too hard to be peaceful when I'm not used to being peaceful than it is to be angry when I'm always used to being angry, right? Does that make sense? So it's kind of this understanding that, okay, I'm thinking in a way that's causing a feeling, and that feeling is causing me to think more thoughts along that same line, so I'm just stuck in this cycle. It's this thinking and feeling loop. It's almost as if your body is becoming addicted to these emotional states. It's like you've built a habit. I mean, there are times where I would be so frustrated about something, I'd be shaking, and I'd be at work working on some menial task where I'm allowed to just think thoughts in my mind. So I'm ruminating and I'm creating some sort of like fantasy scenario about what's some situation that happened that isn't really true, like it kind of happened. But then I'm also projecting myself into the future where if this happens again, maybe I'll do this, or maybe I'll say that, or maybe I'll, act this way or whatever. And so I'm sitting there and I'm doing that. And one day I realized, after kind of going through some of this work, and I realized, like, I'm in one of these thinking and feeling loops. And right now I'm so jacked up on adrenaline that my hands are shaking. Like my palms are sweating. I'm just so involved in this moment that I am creating the necessary chemical concoction within my body to feel like I'm in that fight or flight mode, even though there's nothing going on around me that would inform me to feel this way. I'm not in threat. I'm not in danger. I'm not being chased by a lion. Nobody's coming to attack me. I'm there by myself working, having these thoughts, but amping myself up at the same time to the point where I am in that place where if there was danger, I'm ready to fight or I'm ready to run. Once I started to become aware of that more and more, I started to catch myself more and more in those particular moments. I started to see that, man, my thoughts, my feelings are driving, this behavior that I have through life. How long have I been living like this? And I started to look at myself. I started to really go deep and look at myself and started to think, I've been living this way for so long, and I didn't even know it. I'm just on autopilot thinking. For most of the situations I'm in, most of the feelings that I have, there's no real warranted reason that I should be living with these feelings based on the scenarios or circumstances of my life. I'm not in threat. Why am I acting like I'm in threat all the time? Why do I act like there's constantly a threat against me for whatever reason? And really it's just, feeling like small personal slights and taking that to the extreme. And instead of having some sort of, resistance to those thoughts or some sort of mental toughness that's built up where even if somebody did slight me in some way, I'm just like blow them off and like, whatever, you don't know me, you don't know who I am. So I'm not even going to let that bother me. But because I didn't have that and I was so used to living this way, the smallest thing could set me off. It'll lead me, down depression or anxiety or make me angry or make me bitter. Whatever that deep, dark, negative emotion was. And so when you're dealing with things like that, you have to become aware of what's actually going on within your body. What's going on in your thought life, what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your body, inside, internally, understanding, how you're feeling about that situation. And then you have to pull yourself out of that, and you really have to look at it and say, is the way that I'm feeling warranted for this situation? Most of the time, just in society, I say the answer is probably no. Like, we get so angry about stuff for some of the smallest things. Now, there is legitimate reason to be angry in life. There are reasons to be angry. I mean, that's why we have the different emotions we have. It's not that we shouldn't have any of these emotions, but in our day and age, sometimes they get way overblown because we're just not good at regulating them, understanding the actual circumstance or situation. We just go with it because that's what we always do. So it's stopping that. It's going in and stopping it and saying, I'm not going to allow myself to do this anymore. I'm not going to allow myself to continue down this road and continue to feel the way that I feel, because it's detrimental to me overall. It's detrimental to my family overall. I mean, me being depressed and anxious did nothing great for my family. There's no positive aspect that came from constantly being depressed, anxious, angry, frustrated, resentful, bitter. There's nothing positive out of that. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have some of those feelings in a particular moment, but then you let go of those things, right? You don't hold on to them. If somebody's threatening you, you have that pump of adrenaline, you might get angry, but eventually you should be able to let that go when you walk away from whatever that threat is. When you get away from it, you're at home and you're at peace, you should be able to let that go and go back to a normal homeostasis. Not continue to ruminate on it and develop that sensation over and over and over and over again. I think one of the things that happens is that we just become familiar with it, but it's almost like we're becoming addicted to how we feel. Now, I don't think there's any real literature or research on this, but it would be interesting to find out how much of the chemical release in our bodies that we become addicted to as we experience these strong emotions. And so that's one of the things that I'm kind of interested here when it comes to this is, if we're an adrenaline junkie, we have that term, adrenaline junkie. It's for a reason. It's, people are legitimate going out, putting themselves into potentially dangerous situations because they get a rush from it. They get a high from feeling that adrenaline pumping through their bodies. And why wouldn't we have that same thing with depression, anxiety, anger, grief? We practice it for so long that feeling bad starts to feel good, even though we don't like it. There's a part of us deep down that's just kind of like, I want to feel that again. I need to feel that again. So what do? We recall whatever generates that feeling for us and we go back into it. I mean, I still do this with things. I'll find myself in the shower, taking a shower and start to have some sort of thought about some scenario that's probably never going to happen, and I can start to feel the emotion from it rising up, and I catch myself. I'm like, no. We're not going to go there. We're not going to think about that. Think about something else. Don't go down that road. You don't need to go there. And I think that we do this a lot. We just don't realize that we do it because we're not consciously recognizing what's going on all the time. We just kind of go with the flow. We kind of just allow ourselves to move forward, and however we feel is how we feel, and that's just normal to us. So thinking these particular thoughts that might make me, jealous isn't weird. It's normal. So I'm just going to continue to think thoughts that make me jealous and feel that feeling of jealousy because that's a normal way to live. I have these thoughts of grief, and I'm living in a state of grief just nonstop over and over and over for years because I've trained myself how to live this way. It's normal to feel that way now, right? But it's not normal. We have to get to that place where we start to understand what's actually going on and recognizing, okay, maybe this doesn't have to be the way that it is. I might think that it is now, and you might think that it is now, simply because you've been in that place for so long. You've lived from that place for so long. It's normal to you. Doing it any other way would just be odd. It'd be strange. It's like, who am I if I don't feel this? I felt like that when I was going through the depression and anxiety, trying to get out of that. You'd have sort of this conflict within yourself of, but if I don't feel depressed, how am I supposed to feel? I don't know how to feel any other way. So when I would start to feel happy, or I wouldn't be dealing with depression or anxiety, it would last for a little while, but it'd quickly go back into the depression and anxiety because it's almost like I don't know who this happy person is. And it's weird. It's weird to be this person because the normal version of myself, of Josiah, is that I don't feel good about life. So when I feel good about life, it's awkward. It's off. Something's not right. I need to go back to my baseline of who Josiah is. And so you probably do the same thing yourself, where you have a specific baseline that you fall back to. And when you don't feel that way, it's weird, right? You feel awkward. You don't feel like you're yourself. So it's how do we train ourselves to get to that place where we start to see ourselves as a person that we actually want to be? That happy person that you want to be, or that loving person that you want to be, the compassionate person, the giving person. You know, there's some ideal version of yourself that you have. How do you get there? And really, it's starting to become aware of who you are right now, how you feel right now, and what's going on in your life on a regular basis. Every single moment. Recognizing and understanding, okay, I'm feeling this feeling right now that I'm always feeling. You know, you're constantly feeling a certain way. Okay, I'm catching that. I'm seeing that. I'm feeling this way again. Why am I feeling like this? Is there a reason for me to feel this way? That's one of the things with anxiety that I started to realize. I go into a place and I feel anxious and I start to think to myself, what is the reason for the anxiety that you're feeling? Is it legitimate? Is there an actual reason for you to feel anxious in this moment to the point where, you know, it's taking over your body? And I never necessarily had like a true panic attack, but you could start to feel the walls kind of closing in. I feel like with the anxiety, it wasn't as bad as the depression, so I was able to kind of push those walls back out and not deal with it so bad as I know some people do. But still, it was there, and it was just this feeling of being very uncomfortable for, you know, what? Why? Why are you so uncomfortable? And so starting to question some of the things that you're dealing with, starting to ask yourself the question of, is what you're feeling right now warranted? Is it real? Like, are you facing a real threat? You know, if you're going into a doctor's office, let's say, because I've had this happen to me, where I go into the doctor's office and I start to feel anxious. You know, there's people sitting in chairs or whatever, and I start to feel that way, and I catch myself, I'm like, dude, what's going on? They're just sitting in chairs. Like, you got the receptionist up there, you're going to go talk to that person, give them your information, and then you're going to go sit in a chair like everybody else. What's weird about this situation? You know, what's so strange about this that it would cause anxiety? Because it shouldn't. There's no threat here. It's a perceived threat that we've developed over time about the world or people, or, you know, feeling like you're going to be judged, or what are they going to think of you, comparison. You know, there's so many different things that could be going on that might cause you to feel that way. But when you can pull yourself out of that and you can look at it objectively, you know, almost from like a third person point of view, stare at yourself sitting there while watching the rest of everything else going on and thinking like, oh, like, no, there is no threat around you right now. You're okay. You're good. You start to like deflate some of those feelings so you don't necessarily get stuck in that place. But it's becoming aware of that in the first place. It's starting to recognize it and understand, like, oh my gosh, you're going there again. You're doing it again. You're thinking those thoughts again. You're bringing it up again. In the beginning, it happens a lot. You know, I mean, it can be overwhelming sometimes. I got so tired of realizing how often I was bringing up depression or anxiety. It's just, it takes a lot of energy. But the more that you do it, the more you become aware of it, the more you start to see how much this is running your life. And you start to think, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to live this way anymore. What can I do to escape this current reality and begin to build a reality that I want to live in? A reality that is going to be productive for me. How do I get to that place? Some of that is just interrupting that cycle. It's getting to the point where you're recognizing what's going on. I'm either feeling that feeling within myself. I'm catching myself thinking those thoughts. Okay, I'm aware of it now. And now it's pattern interruption. Nope, we're not going to go there anymore. You know what? I caught you. I caught you, thought. I see you there. I caught you feeling. I can feel you in my body. I feel you, bringing on resentment right now. Nope, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to go to that place. All right. If I'm not going to be resentful, what am I going to be instead? Where can I turn these emotions and direct these emotions so that I'm not living just unconsciously, but I'm taking conscious control of what's going on in my life right now and turn them in a positive direction so that I can live life on my terms. So I can live life in a positive state, in the way that I want to live. So instead of being resentful, I'm going to choose joy. I'm going to choose peace. I'm going to live from there instead. And then you take a moment and you start to practice that feeling of peace, or you practice that feeling of joy. And that can take a while in the beginning, but eventually you start to get better at it, just like you did when you were practicing the negative emotions. For most people, unless you've had an extremely traumatic experience, most people, you're building up these emotions over time. And so it's learning how to build up these other positive emotions instead. You're doing that interruption though. You're stopping yourself from going down that road like you would normally do. And then it's just doing that over and over and over again. It's practicing self-regulation techniques so that you can start to take control of your body, start, breathing differently. You change your breath. You go on a walk. You do something that is out of the norm and kind of breaks your concentration or mindset and shifts it from where you are so that you can get to the place that you want to be. As you're going through this, you want to make sure that you are observing what's going on without judgment, right? If you're dealing with a deep emotional issue, we'll take anger. Everybody is familiar with anger. Let's say you're dealing with anger. If you get angry and then you realize, oh shoot, I'm getting angry. You can't then get angry at yourself for being angry. Does that make sense? You have to get to the point where you realize, oh, I'm getting angry right now. And then you have grace with yourself and you say, that's okay. It's okay that you got angry. You caught it and we're moving on and we're shifting focus and we're going in another direction. So you have to be okay with that. If you deal with depression or anxiety and you realize that you've been, depressed for the entire day and you realize it, don't get upset with yourself. Don't start to beat yourself up because, I'm not supposed to be depressed and I've been depressed all day. And now I'm frustrated with myself because I should have caught this earlier. No, we're not doing that. You have grace and you say, that's all right. You caught it now. You caught it this time. Now start to shift and focus. You have to be able to observe these emotions without judgment whenever they're arising and whenever you're catching them, and not beat yourself up because you're supposed to be doing it a certain way and then you caught yourself not doing it that way. It's going to be hard to make that shift if you're judging yourself in a negative light for trying not to have or deal with these negative emotions. And then you also want to be able to track the emotional shifts in your body, which essentially would just be aware of what you're feeling, becoming aware of how you feel emotionally. So if you're an anxious person, thinking about what is making you anxious. So whenever you go out somewhere, you have to meet somebody new, you have to go to a crowded place, you have to give a presentation, you have to, do a job interview or whatever it is that causes anxiety for you, become aware of that. So when you go into that situation and you start to feel that emotion, you understand okay, I'm feeling it right now. I can feel the anxiety right now. That's okay. It's okay to be anxious. It's okay to feel this right now. What's the worst that's going to happen in this situation? Is there a major threat? Is somebody going to attack me? And you start to put yourself in that place where you kind of pull yourself out of that feeling and you recognize what's going on, but you understand that the feeling is happening rather than allowing yourself to just go with it because that's what you normally do. You take yourself off autopilot and you start to take charge of where you are. And then developing mindfulness can help break some of these automatic reactions, which that's essentially what I've been talking about. Becoming aware of how you think and feel, in your mind and in your body. Whatever's going on with your thoughts, whatever's going on with your emotions, becoming aware of that, mindful of it. And as you're going through this, you want to make sure that you are focusing on where these emotions are showing up. So it's not just that you're feeling it. Where are you feeling it? If you're feeling anxiety, you might feel it in your stomach. You might feel it in your chest. Maybe it's in your neck. Maybe it's in your head. Where are you feeling that feeling? If you're angry, where are you feeling it? If you feel depressed, where do you feel that? I remember one time when I was starting to get really good at this, I was just standing there. Nothing was going on. We were getting ready to go somewhere. And this feeling of depression started in the back of my head and started to just kind of creep up over the back of my head. And I caught that before it really started to turn into a whole depressive cycle. Can't really explain, but it's just, I guess, becoming familiar with those physical sensations. There was no real thought going along with it. It was just this feeling of depression that started to creep in. But I felt it doing that. I felt it creeping in, and I stopped myself, and I was like, whoa, what is going on right now? There's nothing happening that is causing me to want to retreat to this place. Like, the morning's been fine, afternoon's been fine, everything's been great up until this point. Like, nothing really going on that would cause me to kind of revert back into depression. So I caught that, and I went outside on the back porch for a minute. I just looked at the trees and the grass and the sky, and I breathed. Just breathed in nice and deep. And after a while, it just kind of subsided. It started to go away. Now, it didn't go all the way away, but it allowed me to catch it enough so that as we ended up doing whatever it was that we were going to do, I was able to monitor it as we were going. I was able to kind of be more on top of it because I was aware of what's going on. I felt where it happened. Now I'm watching to see if it's going to happen again. And as we go through the rest of the day doing whatever we're doing, I'm thinking about this occasionally, just checking in with myself. It's not like just focused in all the time and that's all I'm thinking about. Can't think about anything else. I got to focus and watch this depression, make sure it doesn't come back again. I'm not doing that. But I'm checking in every once in a while. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? You feeling that depression anywhere? No? Okay, good. Good. We'll keep going. I'll check in again 15, 20 minutes, an hour, see where we are. But understanding where that feeling resides can really begin to help because you start to see, oh, okay. Like when I get angry, it's always in my chest. Or it's in my stomach. Or it's in my throat. Like my throat gets really tight when I get angry. I'm gritting my teeth or I'm clenching my fists. You'll find different ways to express anger or feel anger in your body so that when you have that emotion again, you start to catch it a little bit quicker. You start to see, oh, okay, there it is. I see you now. I see you. I caught you. I caught you trying to sneak in on my mind and my body. No, we're not going to go there, though. Good try. And you can start to feel proud about yourself for doing that. You start to get good at it, and you start to think, hey, maybe this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can change. I can get to the point where I don't have to live this way any longer. And that's so exciting. So I hope that you start to try that, because it really is just the whole physical, mental awareness. The more that you can become aware physically, mentally of what's going on, the easier it is to start to move in the direction that you want to move. You have to be consistent with this, though. This should be a daily practice. If you practice once a week, it's going to be really hard to get to that place that you want to get to. If you are just doing it here and there, it's going to be hard to recognize when the emotions come up. So you want to be consistent with it. And in the beginning, it's going to be a little bit difficult, just like everything is in the beginning. When you're trying to learn something new or do something new, it's difficult. You don't know how to do it. You don't know, all the different mechanics involved. So it'll be a little bit difficult in the beginning, but you should get to the point where it starts to get a little bit easier, and then a little bit easier, and then a little bit easier. I mean, that's the human story, right? You're a baby, you can't walk. Eventually, you learn how to walk after practicing over and over and over and over and over again. And then you get to the point where you're running, and you don't even know how you're running. You don't know how you're walking. If you go outside and try to figure out how you're walking right now, you can't do it. If you try to think about it, you probably can't walk because you're thinking about the process too much. So some of this just starts to become normal. It just gets ingrained in you, just like it is right now with the negative emotions. So it's doing it consistently though over time, just like you're working out. And the goal is to get to the point where you are preventing any of the breakdowns or shortening the amount of time to recovery. So it doesn't mean that you don't have the emotion. It's you have the emotion, but how long does it take for you to catch it, stop it, and then move on to the emotions that you do want to have? And this is something that we talked about, I think it was last week, or in episode 2 actually, and who do you want to become? You need to know who it is that you want to become. If you're an angry person and you don't want to be angry anymore, what type of person do you want to be? If you're a depressed person and you don't want to be depressed anymore, what type of person do you want to be? Jealous, resentment, grief, bitterness, all the emotions, whatever it is that you're dealing with, if you don't want to be that emotion, which emotion do you want to be? Where do you want to live from on a regular basis? So understanding where that is, because that's going to allow you to stop what you're doing, shift focus, and move in that correct direction, as opposed to, oh, I caught this, now what do I do? Where do I go with this now? A great way to kind of be able to, I guess, have a deeper understanding of what's going on within yourself is meditation. I know there are a lot of people who are, they struggle with meditation. You may struggle with meditation. 5 minutes, I can do it. 10 minutes, what's the point? Why am I sitting here? I don't want to sit here anymore. 20 minutes, forget it. An hour, never, right? Because meditation can be difficult. There's all these thoughts going on in your mind. You can't stop them. The more you try to stop them, it seems like the more thoughts come in, flood in. But if you sit and you take just a moment and you sit in 20 minutes of meditation, just allow yourself to sit there and see what happens. How do you feel? What thoughts are you having? Where are you going with them? And just force yourself to sit for 20 minutes and just watch and observe what happens with your mind and your body. Just see where it goes. The more that you can meditate and get better at meditation, the easier it can be to catch yourself when you're having those negative emotions that you don't want to have or experience. Because you learn how to sit in a place of stillness and just let things go by. Because you can't really stop the thoughts from happening. If you're sitting in meditation, the goal isn't to not think. You are a conscious thinking being. That is your purpose, essentially, is to think, create, develop. So those thoughts are coming whether you want them to or not. Now, it's how do you get back to the stillness that's always been there without allowing those thoughts to come in and take charge or distract you or whatever it is that they're doing? How do you get to that place where you can just sit within the stillness regardless of the thoughts and the things that are going around you? Meditation can really help with that. Meditation can really help you get to the place where you can sit in the midst of those thoughts and not be bothered by them. And then when you go out into the real world and you start to have some of these different experiences with the emotions that you have, you start to see how the meditation correlates to being able to control the different emotions that you experience. So if you have this long history of being whatever emotion it is that you are, that you experience, when you start to meditate, you start to see, maybe I don't have to be that person anymore. I can see the thought and I can feel it. It's there. I'm just going to allow it to pass through and I'm going to let it go though. I'm not going to hold on to it this time. Because I think that's a lot of what happens when we experience these emotions. We're so used to them, we kind of just we grasp them and we hold on to them. We don't want to let go because this is normal. This is my normal state of being. This is how I view myself and see myself in the world. And if I don't have this, who am I? But if you can get to the point where you start to let go a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and just completely open hand when it comes to the emotion that you're dealing with, and you allow it to just pass through and you let it go and you don't have to hold on to it, that's when you can start to find the healing. That's when you can start to experience the freedom. And so it's just practicing that over and over and over again. Meditation can be a great way to do that. I know not everybody wants to do meditation, but even 10 minutes a day. You don't even have to sit and meditate. You can go on a walk. Don't take your phone, just go on a walk. Go on a walk and look around and try to just be focused as you go on that walk. Try to be very focused. Even if you're thinking thoughts, be focused on what the thoughts are that you're thinking in the first place. When you're looking at something, really observe it and look at it and be focused on that thing. That's being present. That's being in the present moment, which is the only real moment. We'll probably talk about this later in another episode, but the present moment is the only real moment. The past is gone. The future hasn't happened. The only moment that you have is right now, right here, right now. Not that second, and not the second coming up. It's this 1 second right here and right now. That's the only true moment. Anything that's happened after the second, you can't go back. If the remote falls, off the table or couch or whatever it is, you cannot go back and not make that remote fall off. It's already happened. It happened in the present moment, and it hit the floor in the present moment. But there's no way for you to go back and rewind time and change that present moment. It's already there. So every single second, you are living in the present moment, and any second that passes is in the past. There's no way to change it. Same thing with the future. It hasn't happened yet. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. You don't know if that remote's going to fall or not. You can guess. You can create theories around it. You can create all sorts of things that maybe this could happen, but there's no way to say that, yes, it actually definitely will 100% go that way. So when you're going on those walks, you're doing the meditation, it's just trying to be centered right here, right now. This is what's going on. This is the thought I'm thinking right here, right now. This is what I'm observing or seeing right here, right now. As you're listening to me talk, this is what you're hearing right now. That's the present moment. So if you can get to that place, I think that'll help speed up the process for sure. It definitely helped me out in my journey of beginning to understand kind of this whole thinking, feeling cycle, sitting in meditation and seeing my thoughts, but feeling the feelings as I'm seeing the thoughts, that really helped out. So I would challenge you to maybe start doing that, just even 10 minutes a day. You don't have to spend a bunch of time doing it, but that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see you again on the next one. If you enjoyed today's episode, first of all, I would like to say thank you for watching or listening. The second thing I would like to do is ask you for a huge favor, and that is for you to like the video, comment on the video, subscribe or follow my channel, and probably most importantly, share with your social network so that together we can work on changing the world and making it a better place. Again, thank you for watching or listening, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.